Hello, everybody. I am the Proactive Caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver, because if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved ones. And that is a very real struggle. So today I want to talk about how the struggle is real and how it even remains to be a struggle after our loved ones pass on. You know, it feels impossible sometimes as a caregiver to accept, first of all, that we are caregivers, and then accept, once again, when that journey ends. But finding that acceptance and then once again trying to reclaim yet another identity, it creates a lot of challenges that we're not prepared for in life. But sometimes there are lessons to be learned, and sometimes it's what propels us forward. So today I invited author Debbie Weiss. She has written the book On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. She joins me to share her caregiver story and what she's learned from it. Because after a life of prioritizing everyone else's needs and opinions other than her own, Debbie realized at the age of 50 that this is her one and only life. She didn't want to look back years from now with regret that she had never done certain things. She stopped saying, "I can't," and replaced it with, "Maybe I can." Thanks for joining me today, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So you had a very interesting journey yourself. And as you were becoming this caregiver, I'm curious, did you recognize yourself as a caregiver, or did you just see yourself as wife, mother, daughter, friend?
Funny you should ask that, because when you were just speaking, I'm thinking to myself, I didn't recognize myself as a caregiver. I never equated myself with that word. I always thought that caregivers, I saw definition of a caregiver as a professional,
right?
A nurse, a doctor, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a caregiver to my father when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
That was when I started my caregiving journey. And I absolutely had no idea what I don't want to say what I was getting myself into. But I had no idea that I was a caregiver. No.
Interesting. And usually that is the case because we think of the relationship and there's this sense of obligation or responsibility to the family that we don't really see that, but that's what we are in many cases.
I think when I stepped into that role at such a young age, I was kind of, I don't want to say shy. I was very timid and fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And something about being the one to step up and be there for my father was very empowering to me at the time when I first began the journey. Over the years, that feeling changed to a little bit more, unfortunately, of resentment and
right.
Anger and that kind of thing.
Right. I experienced the same. It's hard once you accept that you are doing this role, and then you start realizing, wait a minute, by doing this role, I'm letting go of these other dreams. And it's not necessarily letting them go entirely. It's putting them on hold. It's a temporary thing. But in the moment, it feels like I'm living my life for you. I'm not living my life anymore.
Absolutely. I didn't realize I had given my life to caregiving, and I would not change a thing. Right. I am not complaining. I would never.
Absolutely.
I've been a caregiver to my father, my husband, and my son with special needs, and I wouldn't change a thing. The only thing that I would change is how I saw my caregiving journey and how I did let it take over my life, where I did deserve to have something for myself too. Right.
Right. And that's what I see hindsight myself, is that if I was given a chance to do it all over again, I certainly would. Absolutely, hands down. But I would step in with the idea that I needed to start therapy sooner than later, and I would learn to communicate better because that was difficult. As you mentioned, this overwhelming fear that happens. It's hard to understand and even realize that we've given up our power in this to all of the fear. And so then knowing that we can actually reclaim that power is not even a thought until much later. Of course, it came to me through therapy, but not everybody seeks that sort of self-help. How did you come to that realization that you could reclaim your power? And then how did you reclaim it?
So I kind of had an aha moment when I turned 50. When I turned 50, my dad had actually just passed away. He had had a massive stroke when he was 45, and he lived for 30 years. So I was his caregiver for 30 years. So he had passed away. My husband was fairly healthy, and my kids were like 10 and 12. And like I said, my son had special needs, and it was just difficult to leave.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriends insisted that we go away the weekend for my 50th birthday. Mm. And on that trip, I was so overwhelmed with how I only had to think about myself. And my friend said to me, well, where do you want to go to eat? And I thought to myself, I don't know. You're asking me what I want to do. I was unfamiliar with that. I kind of didn't know how to respond. And one night we were at dinner and we were laughing and laughing and laughing. And I said to them, I have this crazy laugh. And I asked them, I used to be known for my laugh. They looked at me like, how could you even ask such a question? Mm. Of course you were. That was part of your identity growing up. And I thought, I've lost my laugh. Mm. I have lost my laugh over the last 30 years of my life. And if I want to not continue down this journey, down this path, I'm the only one who can change that.
Right.
And that's kind of where that realization started. And then quite honestly, it's been a slow journey, transformation. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be 60 in a month from today. So for the last decade, it's been a slow but extremely powerful, wonderful transformation.
Yeah, I agree. And in some cases, I remember growing up in my teen years, wanting something so fast. And how much longer is it going to take to get here? I want. And now I am so glad that it's happening in a very slow process, just so I have time to adapt and understand and take the steps that are necessary.
Absolutely. And that's what's going to make it stick.
Right. It's not like a diet or a fad diet that's going to come and go and have to do it again and again and again. Because some of the life lessons that I've learned that are part of that transition, I really don't want to have to go through those again.
Absolutely not. Once was enough.
Right. And that's where I've recognized that the caregiver journey, even though our loved ones will pass, it never really ends because we still have ourselves to care for. And then there's others in life. It took, like you said, it took a long time to even acknowledge yourself as a caregiver. But even after maybe the father passed, husband passed, you still have children that depend on you. So the caregiving role doesn't really end. It just transitions into something different. And that means our routines continually transition. So we have to recreate those routines time and time again. And one of the reasons I learned I need to find my routine, a better routine, is because once Mom passed, my usual days of visits and things I used to do for her was gone. And that added to that loneliness and that feeling of, well, who am I now? Where do I go now? How did you begin to recreate your routines?
I think when my father passed, it was a little bit easier because I was going to visit him every day, but yet I should have been, I hate to say should have been,
right.
At my job. My full-time, I'm self-employed, so I should have been there. The thing that was always difficult, I think, like when anybody passes, he was always calling me, always with the phone calls. And then when he was, really deteriorating, calls from doctors and nurses, and you're, 24/7 with your phone and all of that. And every time
Right.
the phone rings, it takes a while to realize either it's not him, he's not calling, it's not about him. Um, I think the thing I found the hardest is after you lose someone, and hopefully you're fortunate enough to have the love of friends and family who are there for you immediately afterwards. But when everybody goes back to their life,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you're sitting there by yourself
Yeah.
with this grief. And I know when my dad died, and more recently when my husband died, I wanted to wear a shirt that let everybody know what was happening with me, because I couldn't understand how everybody else was going on with regular life and worrying about and talking about something that felt so petty
Right.
when I was dealing with something so devastating.
I agree. I agree. And it's a catch, right? Because part of when I was experiencing that same feeling, part of me didn't want anybody to know that I was experiencing this because I wanted life to keep moving forward. I needed life to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
I was looking and searching for that normalcy again. But at the same time, living in that normalcy, it's a challenge because then there are those that do know and they really want to express their condolences. But I got to that point that every time I heard them say, "I'm so sorry for your loss," that was frustrating. I didn't want to hear that anymore. You're reminding me of what I'm trying to move forward from. And not necessarily forget, but just at the very least move forward from. It's hard to move from that.
It's hard. And for me, at this, when we're recording this, it's been a little over 8 months since my husband passed. And the difference in feeling from my father to my husband, they're very different grief journeys.
Yes.
Very different.
So as you were writing your memoir, I love the idea of, wait a minute, maybe I can. Because that's something that I recognized during my caregiving journey, that when I found myself saying, I can't do this anymore, I can't, whatever, I realized later, okay, whenever I'm saying I can't, that's probably because I'm approaching or in that state of burnout. And so when you began to write this, maybe I can, what led you into that feeling or idea that, wait a minute, maybe I can do this?
I think really examining my life's journey, where I came from. And I was always so fearful of everything and didn't want to be seen and didn't want to be judged and noticed. And, I realized that I was always so quick to say no, or I can't do anything. Either something that I was thinking in my mind, right? Like, oh, maybe I can this. No, no, no. I would tell myself, or if somebody, said, why don't you try this? Or why don't you do this? I was so quick to say that, I think because I was just afraid. I was afraid of what was on the other side. And I was afraid that I wasn't capable. And then when you stop for a minute and you don't end with that, I can't, you give it one more second. That's the on second thought, right? Look, what about the flip side? Because I never explored the flip side. If I look back, and I'm sure I know all of us, if we can look back, I think it's such a great idea to make a maybe I can list.
Yes.
Think of all the things that you've done. I mean, we as caregivers, did any of us ever think that we would have done the things that we have done
Exactly.
as caregivers? No, I'm sure most of us know. And what a huge accomplishment. And so if you kind of arm yourself with that moving forward, and it's a little easier to say, hey, wait a second, look at all those other things I did. Maybe I can do this.
Right. That's
so
awesome.
I don't think I answered your question about the book, but
No, you did, because
Okay.
that is a wonderful idea of making the list. Because I know as a caregiver beginning out, I was afraid to even try to deal with mom's medications.
Sure.
I didn't want to mix something up by accident, especially filling the little medicine boxes by the day, evening, morning, midday. I didn't want to mess anything up. And I kept telling myself, I can't do this, and trying to push it to someone else to do until I started doing it. And it was that feeling of, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe it's not as bad as I made it out in my mind.
It's so funny that you're saying this. I have a 12-year-old dog, Multi-Poo. And since my husband, I mean, he's my partner, but since my husband died, he's really my partner. He goes everywhere with
Mm.
me. And 2 weeks ago, he, out of the blue, got very ill and developed severe pancreatitis. And he was hospitalized and he came home and they gave me 6 different medicines
Oh,
to
wow.
give the dog. Some were pills, some were liquid injectables. My
Hmm.
dog is the most stubborn thing. My husband was the one who like dealt with all of that stuff with the
Right.
dog. And I came home thinking, how the heck am I going to do this by myself?
Yep.
And it's the same thing. And now I chase the dog around, and the dog is, actually, I have to go pick him up. He was hospitalized again, and they're going to give me some other new medication they're talking about. And I'm thinking, this is impossible.
Yeah.
It's an animal, not a person, but it's still caregiving.
It is.
I'm still having that feeling like, how are they expecting me to do this? I'm not a vet. And that's how
Right.
you feel as a caregiver, as a person. Like, how are they laying this responsibility on me?
Right. That is, and see, that's our go-to response. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not this or that. And it's really the feeling inside of saying, I don't want to have to do this. This is scary. This is
This is scary.
uncomfortable. But it
Mhm.
comes out of all the reasons why we can't instead of the possibilities of why we can.
And think how you grow personally in that.
Right, because I'm sure that's what led into that feeling. It's hard. I mean, as you acknowledged, your husband just passed only 8 months ago. And so that idea of independence, part of that has been forced because it's reality. But in some of the cases where you do reach the point of, I can do this. And if I can do this thing, maybe I can do that thing. And maybe I can do this other thing. So that form of independence does start to come about in a positive way.
Now, if you let it come out. So 2 weeks ago, I went to start my car and it was dead. And I have a 20-year-old son who's not very handy, just like me. And I said, I think we have jumper cables. And Ben is his name. And Ben said, Mom, just call AAA. I said, Ben, wait a second. Why can't we try this? So we're both kind of the same brain, just for us to figure out how to put the cars close enough in the garage. And he put something on, we've got the YouTube video, and he goes to put the cable on, and there's a spark, and he's like, I don't think you should do this. And he's begging me to call
Hmm.
AAA. And I said, Ben, no. We are two intelligent people. Neither of us have ever done this before.
Yeah.
We are going to figure this out. And we did. You
Awesome.
know what? What an empowering feeling. And I would never, ever have done something like that before. I had the phone number, 1-800 AAA. I didn't
Right.
need to figure this out on my own, which is what he was trying to tell me, like, stop trying to blow us up and just call the number. And I felt like, no, why not? And I think, that's because to add something else, why do I have to feel that I can't?
Right.
I can do this. We can do this. And you know what? We both felt better afterwards. And I said, you see, now when this happens to you, you'll be more comfortable. You'll know what to do.
Hmm. Right. And that is a very empowering feeling, because then no matter what, you have this feeling of, I am confident. I can do these things. I'm not mentally paralyzed where fear takes over. And when the fear takes over, the stress goes up. And it's no wonder we live in this world of being sick majority of the time, or at least not feeling good and fatigue, that constant, I'm just tired. I don't have the energy. I don't want to do this. And I know there's all kinds of reasons. I'm experiencing in myself at a certain age, hormones and all this other stuff. But when you're paralyzed with fear, it's hard to do anything or want to do anything. But that's awesome. You guys figured it out together, and hopefully you won't have to use it anytime soon.
Exactly.
But you did it.
We did it. We felt great. I mean, like you said, it was so empowering. Like, look what we did. We figured it out.
Right, right. So then, does this help you when you look back to recreating the routine of what else do I want to tackle, or what else do I want to try to actually do differently, maybe? Something that you thought you couldn't do before? Does it give you that different outlook?
Absolutely. First of all, I don't consider myself a writer, something I have never enjoyed at all. I was the person in college who said, you have to write a lot of papers in that class, because if you do, I'm not taking it. And so the fact that I've actually discovered at this point in my life something that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have difficulty calling myself an author, even though here's the book.
Right.
Because that's just not how I ever viewed myself. And it really is proof that you can do anything you set your mind to.
Absolutely.
And let me just tell you that I wrote this book while my husband was dying. It was an idea that was, my husband received a terminal blood cancer diagnosis in June and died in December. So it was 6 months. So it was very quick. And the idea of the book was in the works a couple months beforehand. And the way that I was able to write it was doing a writing course for first-time authors. When it came up, it was right when my husband was diagnosed. And I actually went to my therapist and I said, I'm crazy for thinking to do this at such a time, right? I mean, I've got to show up to this class every week. And what if I don't do the homework because I was busy with my husband and appointments and whatever was going on? And what if the other authors judged me? And I had, all these fears, right?
Right.
And I said, I know you're just going to tell me I'm ridiculous, but I just had to say something. And she said, oh no, I think this is the perfect time for you to do this. And I said, really? And she said, yes, because you are going to need something just for yourself.
Yes.
Separate from your husband, separate from the situations that you're dealing with. This is going to be your solace.
Yes.
And she was right. As long as the challenge was just really making sure that I, no matter what was going on, devoted time working on it every day. Whether it was before my husband got up, whether he was taking a nap, whenever that was, he was resting, I would say, only call me in a case of emergency. I'm going upstairs for an hour. And that's what I did. And so it took, you had to make it happen. I did find it very cathartic, and it was nice to have something of my own to focus on going on simultaneously while going through such a difficult caregiving time.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. It is a very cathartic process. And during the early stages of caregiving, I always heard people say, you need to journal. Well, at that point in time, I didn't have a lot of time to journal, and I wasn't making time either, because I certainly found time to sit on the couch and play on my phone and play games or check email or do all kinds of things while watching TV. But when I really started writing, that was this release that I didn't realize I needed so badly. And I said the same thing. I would never write. Not never write, but never publish. I always wrote journals as a child, but writing the book in the moment was something, it was like therapy in addition to seeing my therapist. It was taking a thought and expanding it out. And I always felt so much better once I got it out of my mind. It wasn't bouncing around anymore. It was out. And I think it's wonderful because now other caregivers will be able to read your book and get that same sense of empowerment, that feeling of, wow, if she was able to do it, maybe I can too.
That's exactly the goal of writing the book, because when I realized it's taken me 50 years to come to this realization,
yeah,
there must be other people out there
exactly.
who are just like me.
Exactly.
If I can be the person to tell them, no, there's another way, despite your circumstances. I just kind of felt sorry for myself my whole life. Like, this is my circumstances. All I am is not all I am, but I'm a caregiver. These are, I'm here to take care of my father. I'm here to take care of my husband and my kids. And this is just my life. And I don't have any choices. This was given to me. And other people, of course, especially through social media, their lives look so wonderful. And for some reason, mine isn't. And oh, well, right. I never realized I had the power. It doesn't matter. Everybody has different circumstances at different times, right? Some are harder, some are easier. That's what life is. But it's up to each of us how we respond to those circumstances.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what encouraged me to write mine, was stop reacting to life, start living proactively. The response, the Pareto principle, 20% of what we do in our lives affects 80% of our lives. And so when we can look at it differently and look at it that way, but we have to be able to look at it differently and get out of the fear space. And for me, it was getting out of the head space, analyzing everything, thinking things through. I had to get in that heart space. And once I did that, I couldn't go back. I felt everything, but it was a blessing, and I don't want to call it a curse, but it was also a challenge to feel everything.
Yeah. For me, I thought whatever I thought was true.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, I agree.
I never realized, I just assumed, I never really thought about it, right? Mm-hmm. Just because I think it doesn't mean it's so. Mm-hmm. I can change those thoughts that are going on in my head.
Yes.
And when I start to change those thoughts, when you just flip that switch a little bit, like on second thought, maybe I can, but, in every way, you change your life. It's simple, but it's so challenging. It is really simple concept.
Right. Right. And that's what kicks off this transformation in our lives. When you're able to break the programming that we've had all throughout our lives. And I think this is why many people reach this moment. I started reaching it in my late 30s and into my early 40s when my father got sick before he passed. Then from that point on, all the way up to this past year, I'm now 48, this has been a transformation of changing over and realizing, finding that level of independence, seeing the areas of codependence, but also finding things that empower me to take the next step and the next step. So as you're going through that transformation, you were learning to laugh at yourself. And that was a hard thing for me. How did that feel for you when those moments started to arise?
But my husband did all the cooking and the food shopping. That was his thing. It was not my thing. And I literally do not know how to cook. The only thing in 30 years I ever made him was toast. When he was really sick, I made him grilled cheese, and he gave me Not Bad, which was practically like a Michelin star. So that was a challenge. And it still is. I don't know why I'm saying it past tense. It is a challenge.
Right.
But what I'm finding is that it's kind of the place where I connect to my husband. You know, when I'm trying to do something with the cooking and I make a mistake and I just can picture him standing over me, shaking his head with a grin on his face, like, oh my goodness, look at what you're doing. And I talk to him. Like, I can't believe this. Can you believe, Gary, that I am doing this right now? It's I one case, I can't stand that he left me in this position, so to speak, just speaking about the cooking in one area. In another way, it is forcing me to grow in ways that I never would have imagined.
Right.
I feel like I am seeing my old self, leaving my old self behind and walking into my new self. And at this stage, I feel kind of in between. You know, I was at a concert last night and there were a lot of couples there. And my husband wouldn't have gone to the concert when he was alive and healthy. So this is not like new that I'm just there with my friends, and that's fine.
Right.
I sit there and there was a couple sitting next to me and they were holding hands, and that we would have been doing that anyway. And I thought to myself, that's not me anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I'm no longer a couple. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. It's hard to come home to an empty house. My one son does live with me, but last night he was out and I come home to an empty house and my dog was in the hospital and it was really empty. It's lonely.
Yes.
It's very lonely in certain moments. And I think that is going to take some time. I think that's the part that is going to take the longest amount of time to get past that. All the other things, I'm moving forward in my life and it's exciting because I am continuing on my transformation journey. I'm not stuck there.
Right.
But that pit that comes out at certain moments is tough.
Oh yeah, I agree. It is tough. Mom has only passed 4.5 months now. And that,
I'm so sorry.
that change of, well, I've learned so much from her, and moving forward, I recognize that moving forward is necessary, but it's that pit and it's the same feeling when I see others out and about and I can tell it's a mother-daughter, you know, couple going through the store or, wherever it is that I am in church or movies or it's that feeling, that pit again, that I go forward and you feel the courage and confidence that I can go forward and I can live life and recognize that life is going to be different. But those moments that you glance around and see that remind you of what used to be, it's challenging, but it's also something that I've recognized I need to take the pause, that it's okay to take the pause, relish the memory, and move forward. But at the same time, I don't like having to take the pause because it is the reminder that they have passed on. And even though they are looking back and following, because I think it's awesome that you are able to feel comfortable, talk with him while you're cooking. I do that with my dad. I feel like I channel my dad when I'm cooking because that's when it comes through. Him encouraging me to try new things and not be afraid, because if it comes out wrong, the worst case scenario, we just throw it away. And I know that sounds wasteful, but I mean, if I don't try, and it's the same thing you're facing now, you've got to try and keep moving forward. But those moments are so challenging.
The other thing I'll share, because I find myself thinking about this often, a bit of regret, which I've had this with my dad and I have it with my husband. Thinking to times when I was short-tempered, where I didn't give him the attention that he deserved. living with that, that is something I need to let go of, because that's not helping anybody.
Right.
And we all do the best we can in the moment.
Right.
You know, it's easy to look back, but, you know, you don't, at least I don't give myself any grace to say, well, think of all that was going on with you and reacted that way.
Right.
Now, that's also difficult to try and let that go. I have to take a pause there and talk to myself and not let myself go down that negative rabbit hole of the shoulda, couldas.
Exactly. Yeah. The attack of the shoulds.
Yep.
I think I experienced it as well. They are horrible, and it isn't the type of pause that we need. It hurts and hinders that transformative process. But I also think when that happens, those are like the little tests along the way, because I react less and less, and I acknowledge the moment and acknowledge how much I knew in the moment versus how much I learned later, so that I can let go and not recreate that memory with I should have this, I should have that, I could have this, instead of, well, I did this because that's what I knew to do at the time.
Exactly.
And it turns into that personal forgiveness.
Yes. Yes. It's a process.
It is. It is very much so a process, just like caregiving is a journey. This is a process after. And that's why I think caregiving never ends, because now you get the opportunity to give yourself that compassion care to really experience, live in that moment. And that moment includes those memories. But now you can look at those memories in a different way. You're not working it in the moment. You can actually see the memory for what it is.
Yeah, you know, I'm so happy to see that you are, and others like yourself are out there doing these podcasts, writing books, and making family caregiving a thing. I can't think of what the word is. You know, it's like earlier on, I didn't even know that I was a caregiver.
Right.
And now that we as caregivers have these tools and these supports, we really need to lean into that, because I have always found that there's nothing better than being in a room, talking and listening to other people who have gone or are going through something similar to what I'm experiencing.
Right. Yes. And that's where I find peace in connecting with other caregivers, especially caregivers who have experienced the stages, because we're all in different stages of our journey, but especially the ones who have recognized loss and that feeling of grief, because the grief afterwards is different than the grief during. And again, I didn't recognize that until afterwards, and I started to feel that different kind of grief.
Yeah. Not that it's nice to go through all the stages, but
I know.
You're right. Yeah. I guess we all do, right?
Right. We do.
What life is.
And one of the things that I started to do to help the idea of, I don't want to squash the grief. I don't want to avoid it, because a lot of love is there. And the memories that are coming through now, I feel are memories that my mother is saying, let me go, but don't forget about this. Remember this and be joyful in this. But now I find myself wanting to create the adventure list in addition to the list of I want to create the adventure list. Have you been able to consider an adventure that you would like to go on?
I love that. Well, so yes, I am going on one in less than 30 days.
Awesome.
I am going for the first time to Italy with 3 of my friends to celebrate my 60th birthday. So we will be there, and we are not going to your typical Italy hotspots. We are going to the southern region, a region called Puglia, which is a little bit more less touristy and more of an authentic experience, and not as, I didn't want that frenetic I need to see everything in Rome, and then we need to hop on a train and get to Venice, and that kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the start of my adventure list, but I love that. And this is my first adventure, but I will start that list, and this is number one. So
That's
great idea.
awesome. That sounds wonderful. I want to hear how it goes because
I'm
that's
excited.
also on my adventure list. And it's really getting out to see the world. And I think as caregivers, once you go through this journey, and especially when you reach the journey's end for your loved one, it gives us a different perspective on life and how valuable and even short it can seem. But the idea of living it, like really living it and enjoying it, comes up. So I hope you have a fabulous time out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very, very excited. It's started planning it in January or February. So, long time coming. It's hard to believe that it's almost here. And I'm excited.
It becomes for me a little infectious because once the anticipation, exciting, waiting for it to come, it's almost like Christmas the night before, Christmas Eve. And then when it happens, it's done. And it's like, okay, where's the next adventure?
You know what? I think one of my self-care tips has always been have something on your calendar to look forward to.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be as big as a trip to Italy. It could
Right.
be dinner with friends,
Right.
It could be something small. But just that anticipation of excitement, knowing that you've got something to look forward to is, I think it's very, very important. It adds a spark of joy to your life.
It does. I'm so glad you said that because we need those little sparks. Because once you get a little spark, you want more, and then you have more sparks in life, and you're just feeding your heart with joy.
There's a very different experience, and this is my message when I've learned, there's a very different experience of just living and going through the journey versus taking control and realizing you're going to make the most of the time that you have.
Right.
And I guess, that's why people who do themselves have near-death experiences, right? They all of a sudden see everything in a new light. And of course, we as caregivers, we see what happens to our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we also can embody that feeling and realize life is precious, life is short, and it's up to me. It's up to you.
Yes.
Nobody's going to do it for you.
Exactly.
I forget who said the quote. I don't know. It was something like, nobody's going to do your push-ups for you.
Right.
Right?
We've got to do them.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it's up to everyone. And why not? What do you have to lose?
Right.
I mean, only good things out there. You make it happen.
That is so true. And I appreciate every bit of this time that you've shared with me to help other caregivers hear that, feel that, see that. And so for the other caregivers who are interested in your book, where can they go to find it?
Anywhere online that books are sold, Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Awesome.
My website, brweiss.com.
Okay. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your story, bits of your story with us. And I can't wait for you to go on that adventure and feel the smile throughout your body. And I hope you share some pictures with me afterwards.
Absolutely.
That's going to be great. And I am so glad you were with your husband and got to be by his side all the way through the end.
Thank you so much.
Transformation will continue. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this episode has given you some more food for thought. I hope that as you are listening or watching, that you also understand as caregivers that no matter what stage you're in, there is something to learn. There is something to teach you, to bring you to that moment of empowerment, independence, and even transformation. If you need any more information or if you'd like to share your story, please reach out to info@proactivecaregiver.com. And until next time, be proactive. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining today. To find out more about becoming a proactive caregiver yourself, visit proactivecaregiver.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Music provided by www.joystock.org. The Proactive Caregiver is produced by Canon Light Media.